Good morning. I'm Scott Wrighton, and it's my pleasure to bring you these weekly videos about what's going on with your city government. Today, I'm pleased to announce that I've appointed Shane Brandell as the interim police chief for the city of Decatur. As has been announced in the media, our police chief, Jim Getz, will be retiring at the end of July. He's going to be sorely missed, and he creates a large hole in the management of the police department. But he's been very active over the last several years in raising up and training people that can take his place, and has built a fairly strong management staff. Shane Brandell currently serves as one of our two deputy police chiefs in the Decatur Police Department, and he'll begin his duties after Chief Getz retires. I also want to announce a major decision handed down to us just today by Congressman Rodney Davis, announcing that the Office of Management and Budget, that's the agency in Washington that does a lot of statistical analysis for the government, has decided to not implement a decision that they had tentatively announced in January that would have removed Decatur's designation as a metropolitan statistical area. What the Office of Management and Budget had proposed to do in January was to say that the threshold for an MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, would move from 50,000 to 100,000. That move would have affected Decatur and more than 100 other similarly sized, medium-sized cities throughout the United States. Now, this designation may seem fairly small, but it had incredible impacts to those 100+ cities that would have been affected. Federal statutes use the term metropolitan statistical area to pass out all sorts of funds, to make certain projects available and programs available. The effect on our efforts to get additional funding from Washington for transportation projects and other infrastructure projects, to say nothing of our transit system, would have been affected by this designation. So this is an important victory for the city of Decatur and all of those other mid-sized cities throughout the United States for this determination of what constitutes an MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, to stay the same. It'll stay at 50,000 and not go to 100,000. And at a time when both state and federal government are passing out a lot of relief money, much of it earmarked for certain types of projects, nevertheless, that probably would have become a sorting mechanism that the state and certainly the federal government would have used if we had lost that MSA status. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the City Council study session held last Monday. Now, the City Council for more than 2 years has been talking about how is it that we plan effectively, not just for next year or even 5 years out with regard to our water system and our lake, but 30 years out. The Lake Decatur is approaching its 100th anniversary. In fact, it was on July 4th of 1923 that the city had a big celebration at the dam and celebrated the completion and the filling of Lake Decatur. So we're coming up on that 100th anniversary, and I believe the mayor and council have plans to celebrate that centennial as we move into the lake's second century. As we move into the second century of Lake Decatur, I believe the mayor and council and many others are very keen on making sure that we are good stewards of that incredibly important resource. Lake Decatur isn't just an important resource for the beauty that it provides our community and the recreation it provides our community, but it also provides key water source for many major industries. In fact, some people don't realize that it was expanded to the lake that it largely has become now by A.E. Staley, who wanted water for his manufacturing facility, and then it grew from there. And we have industries here today that would not be in Decatur were it not for their access to high quality and high volumes of water. So the City Council understands that it needs to plan not just 10 or 20 years out, but 30 years out, and that's what this exercise that they've been engaged in for the last 2 years does. The planning exercise has 4 principal components. The first is, how do we do a better job of making sure that the watershed, not just the areas immediately around Lake Decatur, but including the 900 square miles from 7 different counties in central Illinois that drain into Lake Decatur, that the amount of agricultural runoff, and especially silt and sediment, don't build up in Lake Decatur again, so that the city has to undertake a nearly $100 million dredging project, which it did. Which it finished about 3 years ago after a period of 5 years of dredging. We don't want to have to do that again, or if dredging is required, hopefully it's in much smaller amounts. And so the council has planned for that by installing sediment traps, but also coming up with a watershed management plan that is intended to reduce the amount of silt coming in, not just from the Sangamon River, but also from the other feeder creeks and streams that empty into Lake Decatur. A second key component of the plan is what is the water supply. The water supply was increased significantly by the dredging project. In fact, we gained nearly 30% more capacity just by doing that dredging. But if we want to think long-term about how do we make sure that we have enough water for future demand, as well as for demand that might come externally, as other parts of the country experience global warming and are drier and have less water, the Midwest and the Northeast are projected by many models to be wetter as we move later into the 21st century. If that's the case, we may be the recipient of employers wanting to move to this part of the state because they want access to high quality and large volumes of water, and they bring jobs with them. So a key question that the City Council had to answer is, how do we anticipate that? There's so many variables about what climate change could or couldn't do and what future demand might be, and what some of the other factors about many of the different supply sources. So it's a very difficult question to ask. And so the City Council embarked instead on making sure that we have a continuing evaluative process that looks at different supply sources as we move forward so that we're ready to come up with new supplies as the demand for that additional water comes up. The third category that the City Council planned for was the treatment plan. All of the drinking water that goes to Decatur is produced at the Southwater Treatment Plant at the corner of Lakeshore Drive and Martin Luther King. Several years ago, the city also built a North Treatment Plant that was subsequently sold to ADM, and they use it for non-potable processed water. So the drinking water that we all use comes from that Southwater Treatment Plant. That plant was finished in 1988, and the basic structure of the plant was designed to last for 100 years. And we certainly are managing that facility so that proves to be true. But the mechanisms and the electrical systems inside the plant need to be replaced more often than that. In fact, about a third of the way through that 100-year life, it needs to be replaced, and we're at that first 30-plus year changeover period. So the consultant that the city hired has made some pretty clear recommendations about what we have to do, and they're fairly straightforward, as are the consultant's recommendations with regard to the fourth section of the water system, which is the distribution system. That's actually the most expensive part of the entire lake and water system, is the distribution system, because of all those hundreds of miles of lines and of pumps and of overhead towers, and as well as ground storage facilities and other parts of the distribution system that takes water to our customers. So the City Council gave the green light to the roadmap of how to fix the distribution system over the next 30 years, as well as the treatment plant over the next 30 years, but will likely be much more involved in future decisions about assessing different water supply sources, as well as which are the most effective strategies to prevent siltation into the watershed. These documents some of them are available on our website, others will be made available on our website. So if any of you have an interest in following this very important planning process that the City Council is doing for the future of Decatur, you can do that. I look forward to bringing you future updates on these and other projects of the City Council in our future weekly videos. Thanks for tuning in.